Hi, everyone. Can you hear me well? Hi, I'm Anna from Product Management Festival, and it's great to see so many of you join today for this leadership special webinar. The first one from our deep dives. Hi, I'm Anna from Product Management Festival, and it's great to see so many of you join today. I hope you can, we cleared that. So thank you for joining us. This is our first webinar from our deep dives on topics from the latest trends and benchmarks in product management report. This webinar is being recorded and the recording will be provided to you after the event. I'd like to now introduce our panelists. It's a pleasure to be joined today by David Marquette and Adrian Zwingli. David is a student of leadership and organizational design. He is a former nuclear submarine commander and named one of the top 100 leadership speakers by Inc. magazine. David is the author of the best-selling book, Turn the Ship Around. His recently released book, Leadership is Language, is a Wall Street Journal bestseller. David imagines a workplace where everyone engages and contributes their full intellectual capacity, a place where people are healthier and happier because they have more control over their work, a place where everyone is a leader. Adrian is the founder and chairman of Product Management Festival. His passion is engaging communities and facilitating the exchange and sharing of knowledge amongst them. He is a frequent lecturer at business schools on leadership, strategic agility, and business management topics. You can see the QR code. This is for you to scan and download the Product Management's Trends and Benchmarks Report 2020. If you have any questions or comments on the report, please write to us on info@productmanagementfestival.com. And because you are with us today, we are happy to offer you a discount code for our conference in November here in Zurich. I'd like to now give the word to Adrian, and thank you again for joining.
Yes, hello, also from my side, here's Adrian speaking. So a big welcome out of Zurich here in Europe. And I heard we have quite some people across the globe joining us today. We are expecting roughly 200 people attending, so it's an honor to moderate this part. Yeah, so maybe let's just start into the report to see what it tells us about leadership in product management. And so the report is quite a big report. We have over 73 pages, which is huge. We're not going to dig into all the pages today. I just, there's some highlights about leadership and culture. There are some, people related stuff. So as example, why are product managers quitting their jobs and go to another company? Or how we could improve our companies if it comes to product management, and on. So we have salary statistics, etc. So just download it and look at yourself. But today's topic is leadership and culture. And I think this is one of the most amazing topics we can cover when we lead people or lead organizations. And today, as said, it's about leadership, culture, and psychological safety. So that's one of the key topics for today. So let's have a look at the details. So as a starting point, today, the leadership styles we're looking at, we have 6 different styles. We kind of like, group them in. So we have coercive, that's kind of like, do what I tell you, just tell you what you do and you follow. Or the authoritative, so come with me, come along. Servant, I'm here for you. Affiliative, people come first. Pace setter, do as I do now. Or the democratic style, what do you think? So, each one of us, and even organizations, they may have a primary leadership style, but that doesn't mean that you only have that one. That's an oversimplification we're using here, just to be very honest about it. But if you want to see the details, refer to the report there. We have the description of the leadership styles in there. So as a side note, if you have questions, please put it in the Q&A part of Zoom. We will try to flow those questions into the next 30 minutes when we go into the details with David. So just ask questions, we try to respond. So yeah, what's the first question we ask? What is the primary leadership style in your organization? And look at that. We are very, very proud that servant leadership style and the democratic leadership style are leading. How fantastic is that? So it really looks that our digital organizations are very modern and that we use primarily a modern leadership style. But still, we have 12% with cursive, 16% with authoritative or affiliated with 14%, or pace setters at 14%. So there may be still some work to do, but this is the starting ground, right, for today. If you now look at the next chart, we try to compare that leadership style you have in your organization, the primary one, with the relationship to openness to new job opportunities. So to be very clear, it's about, will your people leave? And depending on the leadership style, is the chance higher or lower that your people, your product manager is going to leave? And here it's very clear that depending on the leadership style, it's higher or lower. So coercive, there's a huge chance. So 45% of the product managers said, yes, I'm actively searching. And 35% not looking, but somehow open. Together, that's 90%. 90%. So if you're using a cursive leadership style, you are on risk. 90% of your product managers maybe want to leave. With a servant leadership style, as example, it's a bit less, and a democratic as well. But here you also see that the other problem, that in general, product managers are very open to leave the job. So we'll dig into that a bit later, what you can do. Yeah, so that's the starting point for today's discussion. The second area we went into was psychological safety. So what's psychological safety? It's the degree to which we feel we can share our thoughts and feelings without being judged or evaluated. And we used here a scale from 1 to 10. It's actually not too bad if you look at it, right? So it's actually more on the right side here than on the left side, but still maybe could be better. So if it's like based on NPS score, 7 and an 8 is neutral. So yes, maybe we could do a bit more if it comes to psychological safety. And then that compared to leadership style, you see that depending on the leadership style, the psychological safety is higher or lower. And now is the big question, what can we do to increase psychological safety in how we lead or how we talk? And that's the point where I would like to welcome David here, and we're just switching from presentation mode to speaker mode. So welcome, David, here in the call.
Welcome. Thanks for having me back.
Hey, it's great. You know, you were a keynote speaker actually last year at the Product Management Festival in Europe. It was fantastic having you there. And you actually brought out a new book. It's called Leadership is Language. And it's, you know, I'm looking forward. Can you maybe tell us a bit more on how you see that and where your view is coming from?
Yeah, sure. So on Zoom, are you still in presentation? Are you still on sharing?
Yes,
okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So I started, as many of the listeners probably know, inheriting a nuclear submarine, which was at the time the worst in the fleet in terms of performance. And we like to say we have a lot of control as submarine commanders, but there was a lot I wasn't in control. And I wasn't in control, for example, who was on the team, what positions they were in, what resources I had, even the schedule. And I always thought about the product we were delivering in two different ways. One product was delivering combat readiness, picking up a SEAL team, being in a certain place, gathering some intelligence. I thought about that product basically on a horizontal axis. The other product, though, was because there was rotation, officers and the crew would leave the submarine, and they would go out to the Navy. And I thought about a people dimension in the product. So I wanted to deliver people who are increasingly learning about leadership while at the same time delivering our core product to the Navy. The tool I had, when you take away all these things, what's left is language. And language is very, very important. So, for example, we would have to do things like this. We're picking up a special forces team on the submarine, and the way we prepare for this and the way you interact is language. Now, when you look at those slides that you showed, Adrian, in your report, and we have these different leadership styles, coercive, pace setter, servant leadership, and we asked, if we were to ask people what's the evidence of those leadership styles, people would almost always cite language. Well, it's the way the person talks, it's the way they listen or the way they don't listen. And so language is very, very important. One simple example was we would fight fires. Here we are, this is the team fighting a fire in the submarine. And at the end of the fire exercise, fake fires, we would practice, and we would say, how'd it go? And I heard this word, they. Well, they did not put the equipment back right. They did not pressurize the fire hose when I asked, and there was they. Well, they is pointing fingers like this. And I said, you know what? Let's just use the word we. And I said, there's no they on Santa Fe, which rhymed, so that was convenient, so people believed it. And when you would use the word we, it changes your brain, because when you say the word we, it sends a signal, this person is on my team. And then sure enough, several months later, it felt like we were one big team. But the language drove the change in our brains, not some idea, some lecture about being a team. So I started building a list of things for me to say. I'll give you some examples of language which are not helpful. Does that make sense? We good? You're right? So in other words, I give an explanation, or maybe the group makes a decision, and then I follow it with, does that make sense? Well, first of all, it's a binary question. The answer is either yes or no. And secondly, it makes it harder for someone to say it does not make sense. And what you want through your language is, instead of saying that, say, what didn't make sense? What could we explain better? What seems strange to you? In other words, make it easier for people to speak up, because it's about psychological safety, which is when you're going to say something that's different from where you think the group is thinking, like you're the person who thinks the product should not be launched, but the group thinks it should be launched, or the boss thinks it should be launched, you have a choice to make. And if it's not a safe environment, you're just going to stay quiet. No one's going to know that you had that perspective, instead of maybe afterwards. And when I think about the Boeing 737 MAX, it was not an environment. We know now that there were people in the organization who did not think the product was ready, but they did not feel that they could speak up in a good enough way. It's all about safety. So what you want to do in your language is make it easy for people to challenge the group, easy for people to speak their mind. So we had a whole bunch of phrases. So for example, I'll give you some examples. On the side to avoid, are you sure? Is it safe? Will it work? These are all we're trying to make the future predictive and deterministic, which it's not. We never know for 100% that the product's going to sell. We can do some testing and we have some pretty good idea. So we instead change your words to, how sure are you? How safe is it? How likely is this going to work? What's the probability? Start the question with the word what or how. So I started assembling all these, don't say this, say it this way, in order to help me talk to the team in a way that made it easy for them to speak up.
So
and that's what gets,
David,
go ahead.
Now you're like a bunch of product managers, right? So
yeah,
you're in a room, and now we have a top leader, maybe even the CEO, saying, okay, now we're ready, we're going to launch, right? I mean, how would you speak up? I guess the chance would be very low. But how would you phrase that? Just direct that example. How would you phrase that differently in the room?
That's a very tough thing. The way I would start is with description. I would be supportive of the decision. I'd say it sounds like we've already decided that we're going to launch the product. If I want to be more provocative, I might say, are we still deciding when we should launch the product, or have we decided to launch it? And I would say something like, look, I can support product launch unless you feel like it's an ethical thing, like people will die, then maybe you cannot support product launch. But you say, I'm going to support product launch, is your decision. So we're not going to attest authority. Then I would start with description. We noticed as we were testing the product, the following thing. Now, you may get, okay, well, tell me more about that, or what do you think that means? Then you can say, well, so I think that there's a risk. I'd say 5%, 30%, 99% risk. I think there's a risk of whatever, we're exposing people's private information, or the product has a security hole or something like that, and put it in a probabilistic way. But say, if that seems acceptable to you, yeah, let's go ahead and launch the product. But if that level of risk does not seem acceptable, then my recommendation would be not to launch the product. But I would don't have it be a contest of authority, and start with description. We go description, analysis, prediction. So description, here's what I see. Analysis, here's my assessment. Prediction or recommendation, I don't think we should launch, or I think we should launch. But you're in a tough situation when the boss talks first, which means the meetings, we're actually running the meeting wrong. What you really want to do is vote first and then have a discussion. The purpose of the vote is to see how people feel. You want to see where people feel very strongly, yes or no. And you vote on a 1 to 99 scale, not yes, no. There's no 0, no 100. We use these cards. And they go 1, 5, 20, 50, 80, 95, 99. And the reason there's no 0, no 100 is because we're never certain. It's never 100% certainty.
So what I hear, David, is basically like you prefer to have like a range to choose from, and not an absolute yes or no, right?
Yeah, because when we want to think, it's always to think there's a definite yes, no is just, you're just deluding yourself. We call it it's a rush to simplicity.
Yeah, true. Hey, we just got a first comment in, and it's from Hal Taylor. Thank you so much. We have the message. How about, what indicators do we have that the product is ready for launch? What do you think about that question? Put the question that way.
Well, it depends on how much testing the company has done, and what's the risk in the product. If it's of something like 737 MAX software, then I would want there to be a fairly high amount of testing. If it's like an update to Netflix delivery, I mean, who cares? No one's going to die because their movie didn't play. So like, let's do it and see what happens, and then we can go ahead and fix it. Those are all very individual, but the key is being able to understand what the risk is and having open conversation about the probability that it's going to work or not going to work.
Super, that's great. So please, folks, put your questions into the Q&A part. We are happy about every question we can put into our conversation. David, please go on.
So my problem was I had this big list. Don't say this, say that, but they weren't structured. It wasn't organized. And I kept asking myself, why is my instinct to say it this way? Why do I keep hearing other people say, does that make sense? I hear it all the time. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? We good, right? And my hypothesis is it comes from this. It comes from industrial age organization. Now, there are two things about an industrial age organization you really need to know. Number one is we separated the people making decisions, in which case it's this person over here. This is the foreman. He's the only person without anything in front of him, from the people doing the work. So there were two functions, deciding about the work and the actual doing of the work. And we separated that. Some people will make decisions, but they won't do the work. Some people will do the work, but they're not making decisions about the work. The second thing in an industrial age organization is it's all about the clock. So the words like clockwork, we clock in and out, we pay people by salary. This is all a vestige of obeying the clock. And when you look at that, what happens is there are patterns in the language, and I call them plays, like football plays, which, given a certain situation, I can almost always predict what the response will be. So if someone challenges you, we tend to respond, reply, react. We tend to say, no, no, let me explain. If someone says, I don't think that was a very good decision. Oh, no, let me explain. Rather than what would be better is, oh, let me hear more from your side. The phrase we use is be curious, not compelling, but our instinct is to defend and explain. And so, and why is that? It's because we're wired, we're programmed for this, from this era. The words we say and that feel normal are from this era. So the new book is all about, what does the new playbook look like? And that's this leadership as language. And so there's two core ideas. One is, you got to get away from this, where one people decides for the other group. So in other words, you got to let the people doing the work make decisions about the work. And when the CEO says, we're going to launch the product, you're violating that rule, because the CEO did not, I'm guessing, write a single line of code or connect any wiring harnesses. So he or she is not letting the people who actually did the work make the decision, is the product ready to be launched? That's what you want. That's actually a better answer to the question than what I said before. I think it's a more complete answer. The people who built the product are the ones who know best about whether it should be released, not the CEO and the CFO. And number two, it's about obeying the clock. It's about controlling the clock, not obeying the clock. And here's the reason why. When you feel like you're under pressure to get something done, the level of psychological safety goes down because stress goes up. When the leader says, time out, let's take a think on this, I'm not worried about whatever product we're not making over this next 10 minutes. Now we can, our stress level goes down, our brains relax, and we say, well, actually, here's what I think about this. And it's about controlling the clock. And it all happens through language. It happens through someone saying time out. It happens through someone saying, no, go, go, go. That's the difference between the different kind of leadership styles. And so I'll give you a couple examples of things that work in this way. One is, a lot of you guys probably know about the Toyota production system, and the thing they have is called an andon cord, which is a cord for the worker to say, hey, got a problem. Let's pause the line if we need to, and let's help me solve my problem. And the second thing is Agile, because Agile has a natural rhythm where we dive into the work and we do it for a while, and then we pause, and then we do a retrospective and we reflect upon the work. But these are just two examples of current systems. But if you're not in a software production team, you might not be doing, quote, Agile, and you might be confused as about how that applies. And only in the most enlightened leadership organizations do we understand it's controlling the clock, not obeying the clock. So we did some research. One of the research happens to do with this ship, the El Faro, which sailed into a hurricane. But let me pause there and see what kind of reactions, like what's just everybody just kind of what's on your mind here, and how do you imagine using this at your workplace? Adrian, did I lose you? Because I didn't hear anything.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I got lost for half a minute. Sorry. Sorry about that. Sorry, I cannot answer your question. In terms of El Faro, can you maybe just give us a bit more insight there, what happened on El Faro? I think it's a very good example in the book about how they used language, like how much time, like the commander, the captain,
Yeah.
used, and how much time actually the crew was able to speak.
So this is an interesting case. This ship that you see behind me sails from Florida. This is Florida, the bottom of Florida. This is Puerto Rico. This is Cuba. So this is in the Caribbean. And this is the Atlantic Ocean over here. And this is where the hurricanes form. And a hurricane was coming, and it actually looked like this. And you can see the hurricane. And the ship sailed into the hurricane and sank. And this was only 4 years ago. So they had all the modern equipment. Now, the thing that was interesting was the government was able to locate the sunken ship. None of the 33 bodies were ever found. They abandoned ship before it sank, but the ocean took them. And there's a 500-page transcript. Now, we listen to black boxes on airplanes, and we do analysis on that. One of the things I like about a ship analysis is that it's much, much longer than a typical airplane vocal analysis can be. And when you listen to it, there's two interesting things that come out. Number one is, one of the things we did was we charted the number of words that each person said when they were in groups of 3. And so the group of 3 that we looked at was the captain, a ship's officer, and a crew member. So this would be the person steering the ship. So on the bridge of the ship, there was very often this group of 3 people. And there were 3 of these different teams, each headed by a different officer. Now, it turns out that in every case, if you just added up the words and I said predict, but I took away the titles of who said the words, and I said, now just predict who this person is. If you simply predicted based on the number of words and you matched it to the hierarchy, you'd be 100% perfectly correct across all 3 teams every single time. And you can see the captain said the most number of words, followed closely by the officer, and way behind was the crew member. Now, their salaries, I don't have the exact salary information, but I'm guessing the salaries were probably something like that. The captain was probably making $200,000, the officer maybe $170,000, and then the crewman maybe $50,000. So the crewman makes a lot less money than these two, and it's freaky. The word count almost follows the exact proportions of people's salary. It's like your salary allows you to buy a certain number of words. Now, the problem is in teams where there's uneven word count, it's not a very good decision-making team. It's a fragile decision-making team. And that was the case here. The ship's approaching this point. The storm is building. Remember, here's the storm, is what it really looked like. The waves are whipping. The ship is rocking and rolling. They're getting the weather reports. The storm is out here in front of them as they're coming down this way. And they have this chance to turn and go behind. And there's the calls to the captain they're hesitant. You can hear the officer saying, well, we could turn. It's almost as if they're talking about a different team. And then there's like, okay, click. The captain doesn't ask any questions. There's no further explanation. And it's all about, and the language reveals that they're having a hard time convincing the captain they need to turn. Now, they could actually just order the ship to turn. They could just say, turn left, and I'm just going to drive it here. And they could just call the captain and tell him, hey, it's too dicey. I'm turning. They have the authority to do that, but none of them do it, and they all end up dying. But the language reveals these very interesting patterns. One was the number of words, and the second was the kind of word that people said. And you have the captain ahead of time saying things like, oh, we'll be fine. And you wouldn't want to be a mariner who's afraid of a storm. Oh my God, and he uses frantic voice to mock and make fun of people who would actually do exactly this. And then we are surprised when it's hard for the people to challenge. And oh, by the way, the captain was the guy who made the decision to go this way.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
As product managers, I'm just thinking about it, what's like an indicator we could use for the right proportion of, let's call it speaking time. Is there like a model you would see, or an indicator you could use?
Yeah, we call it share of voice, and you can mathematically model this with, we use a thing called team language coefficient. The equations are in the book. We look at it just like income inequality. So there's word inequality. I don't know. We don't have enough analysis on that, but what we do know is a situation like this, where one person is very, very quiet, or the opposite situation where one person is saying almost everything, both those situations are very fragile. In this case, the team does not know what this person knows. And so we're making a decision without that information. So they may be the one who has the key information about what's going on. And on the other hand, if there's one person who's talking too much, their opinion tends to over influence the group, even though what they're saying isn't any more relevant or important than what anybody else is saying. So you want to make it even. And if you're sitting in a meeting and you see that someone hasn't, the role of the facilitator in the meeting is not to drive a decision. It's to make sure everyone's voice is heard.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think, can you maybe just repeat that again?
Yeah, the role of a leader or a facilitator in a meeting is not to drive a decision. It's to make sure everyone's voice is heard.
Wow, this is amazing. This is amazing. One part of the questions actually went into that direction. It's about, like, what should I as a leader do? And you just answered that question. Make room that people can speak up and feel confident in speaking up. Wow, this is fantastic. What else could we do as leaders?
Just keep asking yourself over and over again, why am I saying it this way? Why am I running the meeting this way? Why am I asking the questions this way? Again, let's say you're coming up to a product launch decision meeting. The way most organizations run that is they'll talk about it. Hey, it's time to launch 737 MAX. What do you guys think? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's vote. Good, bad. And neither of those are the right way to do it. What you want to do, again, vote first, then discuss. And when you vote and say, how strongly do you support launch of the product? And you let people vote with those cards, 1 to 99. What you're looking for is 1s and 99s. You want find the people who feel very strongly for launch and very strongly against launch. And then those are the people you invite to speak up. All the people in the middle, don't worry about them. And if everyone is on one side, except for 1 or 2 people, always go to the smaller group first. And you might not even need to hear, if you're the leader running this and you think, yeah, we're good, we should be able to launch, but I'll just ask the question anyway. And 80% of the group is up at 95, 99. Yeah, we should launch. But there are a few people down at the other side. You don't need to hear from these people. You already know what they think. Hear from the other people. We call it embrace the outliers. Welcome the people who think differently than the group and make sure you hear what they have to say. Now, you don't have to agree with them and you don't have to change product launch date. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, when you decide to launch the product, make sure it's fully informed.
We got a question and it goes into that direction. Unfortunately, no name here, but it's often as a can-do PM who is part of the best performing team in the organization, I feel bullied into committing to more work than is possible to be accomplished in a given time span. I mean, wow, well, that situation, I guess many of us know. How could we deal with it?
Yeah, for first off, these are the, I said there were these plays. So these are the 6 plays, and these are the industrial age plays. Obey the clock, which I talked about. And when you say, I feel bullied. So first of all, thank you for having the honesty to say that. I have felt that way too. We overcommit. Because what happens is the leaders are coercing someone else to do the work, and then we comply. We say, okay, I'll try and get it done. And then it doesn't happen. And so what you want is for leaders to be truly collaborative, using the kind of words we talked about, and then it allows us to commit. There's an exact story like this in the book. I give some sort of use cases near the end. So here's a couple things you can say. Someone says, hey, I need you to do this. You take a look at it and you can say, okay, I think this is going to take 12 hours over the next couple weeks. I can do it, or I can't do it, or what do you want? Okay, here are the things I'm working on. What can I not do? If you have a backlog and you say, okay, here are the projects I'm working on, A, B, C, D, and you have a backlog like an agile team, say, now, how important is this relative to, is it more important than this other thing? Oh, no. Okay. Is it more important than this? No. Well, okay. So in other words, it's not that important. So how about I commit to working on it after these other, is that okay? How okay is that? And it might feel uncomfortable to talk like that, but if you're not in the practice of talking with your boss, hey, here are the things I'm working on, and I think this is the priority, and I think this is a 20-hour project, and this is a 15-hour project, and this project, which I thought was a 20-hour project, is really an 80-hour project, and let's make sure, if you're not doing that, then it's going to be very hard to challenge when they dump this thing on you. But if you had routine conversations, one of the things in the report, there's this, one of the themes is to have more frequent communication. One of the things that's obligation on you is make sure your boss knows what you're doing and where you're spending your time. Be transparent about that and say, hey, I feel really overloaded by this. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. I can spend 1 hour and I'll see what I can come up with.
Just maybe to give some background on it, on the study David, you just referred to, was about the PMs with the highest happiness score in organizations have a weekly with her boss. And this is super important. So if you want to lead better, we as leaders, we should take time to talk to our people, not just to hide somewhere behind the screen.
Listen.
Listen. And it's not only hearing, it's listening and trying to understand and hear them. And then you can open up. I think that's one of the key essence we had out of the report. I think that's totally in line what you just said.
Right. And but it's not just, oh, let's talk, blah, blah, blah. There's a structure to the communication. And one of the things you want to do as a leader is, if your person's not presenting it like this, okay, what are you working on? What do you feel stressed about? How stressed do you feel? Which of these projects do you think is most off track? In other words, talk about how they're doing, not, well, how are the projects doing? Let them work on the project. And if you're the subordinate, have a discussion with your boss, I think that's one of the things you want to discuss. Hey, these are the things I'm working on. Here's how I'm feeling about it. This thing here, I've been working on all week. I don't really feel like I'm making progress. How important is it?
Super. Hey, what about we're going into the questions we got here. Let me just dig into, I think we have a similar question in an organization where the top management is very much go, 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 as you said. What are the strategies to help that management layer understands that timeouts are sometimes necessary for the good of the products and the organization?
A lawsuit when the product kills people.
So is it an experience? So what I hear is like sometimes they need to experience either like a negative case or sometimes maybe experience a benefit. I always, when I talk to our clients, it's, managers are not dumb. They're very smart people. There's a reason why they're there. And when we give them benefits, as example, good information, I think that helps to open up the system. But then it's on us. So I think we should not just point at them and say they need to change. It's maybe on us and saying, hey, look what I can provide. It's like reframing a question from, are we ready, yes or no? We say, well, I cannot answer that, but I can give you percentages and how I would measure it. So like, how about that we start changing the language and not wait for the others that they change the language?
Look, no one's going to be happy when you go and you're the person who says the product's not ready for launch. I mean, there's zero people who will be happy about that. But we have Volkswagen, Boeing, this El Faro. These people felt pressure. Why did they not want to take the longer route? Why did they not want to make? Because it's longer. It burns more fuel. It takes longer to get into port. It costs more money. It shrinks profit for the company. So no one's going to, how about this one? Let me show you another picture. This is Deepwater Horizon in the Gulf of Mexico. This thing is 100 miles from where I live. And again, same thing. Yeah, no one's going to be happy with say like, no, we have to redo. In this case, they had a test that showed that there were problems with the well, but they're like, nah, it's fine, blah, 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 keep going. And again, obeying the clock rather than controlling the clock. Well, billions of dollars. Yeah, but no one's going to be happy about hearing that. But there's so many cases where this rush to get something done causes this huge problem. And it's like, I can do a little bit better, a little bit better. And then it's like, it's not like the ratio was 1 to 1. The ratio is 1 to 10 million. The losses that BP, Transocean, and the supplier of these parts suffered relative to what they would have gained, it's 1 million to 1.
Oh, it's crazy. Question maybe from Nadine Anderson put one in. I believe very strongly in the power of language. Nadine, that's great. Wondering if you have some thoughts, experience with challenges across languages and cultures in diverse teams.
Yeah, so one of the things, I'm lucky because a lot of companies, international companies are saying we're going to use English as our common language. So it makes it easy for me. But I think one of the things that's very useful for a team is to take some of these phrases that I've been talking about. Are you sure? How sure are you? Put it and translating that. Let's say we have a division in Barcelona. Okay, now how does that sound to us? What would we say? And then go back and say, now when we say this, what does that mean? Another one of our constructs is we call it the ladder of leadership, which is the idea is how much authority am I giving people? And you can see this is tell me what to do. This is what I see. This is what I think. This is what I recommend. This is what I intend to do. Well, these words are all very specific in English. What do you intend to do is a very specific word in English. In Spanish, it doesn't mean the same thing. If you say, if one of my officers came to me and says, I intend to submerge the submarine, and I were to put a probability, and I said, okay. And I said, what's the probability that will happen? I would say it's like 99% it's going to happen. But if someone in Spain says, I intend to do something, and I did this in a Spanish at business school in Barcelona. I said, what's the probability that they will actually do it? It's like 5, 10, 20%. It's just a different word. So they have a different word. So
I see. You know, language matters at the end, right? Again, language matters. We have one question from Liz Story. What should you do if you have someone who is dominating the meeting with the voice?
So there's a couple ways to do that. So first off, challenging them in the meeting is going to be a gutsy move. If they're the brand new person, you might want to say, hey, this is not how we run our meetings. Maybe better is a way to, I imagine a clock, and every time someone talks, the clock starts moving in front of them. And so we could see, oh, that person, okay, you've used your allocation to talk. Now, one of the rules we have is you can only speak 4 sentences in a row.
Nice.
Once you say 4 sentences, if you want to have a rule, which I have mixed feelings about it, but some people have a rule that say, well, there's a concept of a talking stick. When someone's talking, no one interrupts. Great. But if you don't have the other rule and that person only gets to say 4 sentences, then you just open the door for someone to start talking and then they go blah, blah, on and on and on and on and on. You got to have both rules. You can't just say, we're not going to interrupt and you can talk forever. That's not a good. So structure the meeting in a way that it makes it hard for that person to speak. Or you just say something, hey, thank you very much. Let's hear from somebody else. How do the rest of you guys see it? Something like that.
That's great. I actually like the 4-sentence rule, and I know a group where they actually wave their hand. Like if someone is talking more than 4 sentences, like the others are allowed to wave their hand up, raise it up, and like everyone knows. I mean, it needs an agreement up front that it's okay to do that. Well, I think in a team,
that's key. We say, hey, here's some of the protocols that we're going to use. Number 1 is when we start talking, we're going to limit it to 4 sentences, which means you better decide what you're going to say. Most people just start blah, and they don't think about what they're going to say. And I love the idea of being able to raise your hand. Sometimes we hand out the referee cards in a meeting, and we'll say, okay, today, if you feel like. There are all kinds of things you can use them for, but if someone goes past the 4-sentence rule, raise the card. And everyone's like,
that's great.
Okay.
If you go back and say, this is a new play. You said, there's an old play or a new play. And I think in the book you refer to like the red play and the blue play.
Yeah.
And like how that works. So now we have to adapt new ways of work, like a new play. We have to like train that a bit, right? You have to exercise that. How could we do that? What's your tip? Like tomorrow morning, what could we do differently in our meetings?
Well, you learn it just like you learn a foreign language. You don't do a 1-day away day or an offsite and think, oh yeah, we learned French today. It doesn't work like that. You try a different thing. So two things. Number 1, start with you. Number 2, start small. I guess there's three things. Do it every day. So for example, let's say you're someone who tends to want people to agree with them. So here's what I'm thinking, blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense? So I think blah, 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 right? Then you may say, look, I want to stop that behavior. I'm going to replace, does that make sense, with a different phrase, like what was unclear. Always, what you want to do is invite and make it easy for the dissenting opinion. So let's say that's the thing. Just start with that.
That's fantastic.
Start with asking the question. Start with the word how. Let's see. I'm looking for a slide to maybe help with this. The other thing is to control the clock, not obey the clock. Remember back here and listen to the words that you're saying. Hey, we got to get this done. Hey, this is really important. Like these are all obey the clock words. These add a little small stressors to our people. Say, okay, when can I control the clock? When do I need to say time out? Is that appropriate? If I say time out, how long can we wait before we start again?
When we now go back to the different leadership styles, we received a question from the 6 leadership styles we looked at the beginning. Which one is the ideal one? Like, is there one? What's your opinion? Is there like one that should be the best one, or how do you see
that? Let's see. Are these the 6 styles there?
Yeah, we have coercive, authoritative, servant, affiliative, pace-set, and democratic.
Yeah. There's an ideal one in a certain situation. If the building's on fire and the fireman comes into the building and everyone's hiding under their desk, you don't want the fireman to say, hey, how can I help everyone today? You want them to be very clear and direct about what you want people to do. Now, if you look at these, they're actually all pretty close except for coercive. I think coercive probably is, coercive comes from that industrial age picture I showed you, and it's probably never really that good.
Yeah.
It depends on the urgency of the situation, how important the thing is, how much time do you have, and what your perspective is. If the team's coming together, say we're only going to be here for a week, and then everyone's going to go and do something different, then spending a lot of time, you spend 5 days getting to know each other and 1 day doing the work. That's not going to work either.
So at the end, it's about us having multiple leadership styles we can play with. But then,
Yeah, to be honest, I don't really think about it in terms of like a style. What I think about it is how much control am I giving the team? That's your decision. And which play am I using? Am I pausing to do thinking work? Are we going to make a decision, or am I diving in and doing the production work? Like, just go start building. Let's go build something for 5 days, then come back. Let's take a look at it. Or do we say, no, let's talk about it for 5 days, then go build it? Like that's the rhythm the leader has to deal with.
Thank you so much. And then we had one question about what percentage of the polled PMs here in the survey were women. I think, as far as I know, it was 40%. It's also actually, it's in the report. We have statistics on it, on the diversity of the answers we received. Then there's a question on body language. Like, how often you often hear that in communication, body language plays a bigger role than spoken words. Do you need both to make it work?
Yeah, so the study is the majority of communication comes through the words. The study is when body language and the words are different, go with the body language. But when we're talking, especially if you're going to do Zoom, it's hard to see my facial expressions because I'm just little tiny thing on a little tiny screen. I'm not sitting right in front of you, and you can only see part. You might not be able to see when I go like this or roll my eyes. So I think if your words are true, your body language will be consistent. The thing we love about words is we can measure them. We can count them. We can record them. We can transcribe them. We can analyze them. They're subject to all sorts of analysis. Body language is a much harder thing to analyze.
Yeah. Maybe so. Last question. In your book, you write about playful curiosity. I highlighted that in your work. I think it's amazing. Playful. How can we increase or support playful curiosity? How do we get there? Like, what would be your main tip for that?
So there's play, curiosity, searching, seeking, discovering new worlds. It's something that's wired into us. And you don't need, you put a kid in a crib, they're going to try and climb out. You don't need to teach them that. What we've done, though, we've suppressed that. Some psychologists call it the seeking system. It's ancient. It's going to find the berries on the hill that's beyond the hill that we can see, and then being delighted when we discovered a new crop of berries. And we can celebrate it. We can celebrate the serendipitous discovery of new things. We can model it. We can ourselves be curious. We can read new things, watch podcasts and YouTubes. So we're celebrating it publicly. We're modeling it, and we can invite people. We can say words like, "Well, what would we learn what would we learn from that? How would we know?"
So the what and how questions again.
Yeah. And because again, there's two dimensions. I talked about the product dimension and the delivering the person. There's also sort of here's what we're going to do and here's what we're going to learn. And many times all we hear about is here's what we're going to do. If we looked at the company's quarterly goal, let's say you do quarterly goal statements. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to build 10 million widgets. I rarely see company statements that talk about here's our learning objectives for the next quarter. And so just by asking the question, okay, here's what we're going to build, but what are we going to learn? It's very powerful. If you look at the Jeff Bezos's Amazon report from 1999, he talks about, this one is the first annual report of the company. Hey, here's what we've achieved. We're live on the internet selling books. We have much to learn about how this whole thing works. So he's one of the few guys that I've seen talk about the two dimensions. A lot of times you just hear about this.
So again, it's about creating this space. I mean, you mentioned that before. Our job as a leader is to create the room, set the stage that people can speak up. And that's a part of learning, as I understood you. There is one last question, and we're coming back to submarines, David. We have Ken Chin. Hi, Ken. Thank you for the question. On a nuclear submarine, does the language change when the ship is in action? Does the leader need to sometimes be more directive under critical conditions, like we're under attack, or our mobile app just went offline? So that would be the digital world. Again, does the language change when the ship is in action?
Yeah, how does the language change? Start the question. Yeah, so the language does not actually change that much, because what we trained ourselves to do is talk in the language of intent. And it got shorter. So normally people would say, I intend to load a torpedo. And they would say, here's why, and here's how we're going to do it. And then I would say, okay, or very well. And then they would go do that. When things get very dicey and very, very fast moving, if the team is appropriately trained and they know what to do, people are saying, loading a torpedo, shutting the door, flooding the torpedo with water, lining up the sonars. They're just saying what they're saying, and they're vocalizing what they're doing. It's when the team does not know what to do that we have to jump in as leaders. And it's true whether we're in an emergency situation or we're not in an emergency situation. So the reason for teams, generally what we say is, oh, in an emergency, I got to go and issue a bunch of orders. Why is that? We think it's because it's an emergency, but the real reason is because I'm now thrown the team in a situation where they don't know what to do. If you can talk about, okay, if we have a failure with the app, what's everyone going to do? If our servers go down, what's everyone going to do? Then you can we're going to have COVID-19 and everyone's going to work from home. My sense is, oh, I want to grab back control, but you really want to resist that, because the reason you have to tell people what to do, the feeling of needing to tell people what to do doesn't come from the urgency of the situation. It comes from the fact that everyone's running around not knowing what to do.
Nice. Hey, David, thank you so much for your insights. Much appreciated that you took the time to speak to our product management community about leadership and language, and that leadership is language. So thank you so much for that. For everyone out there, if you want to have a good read, that's the book, Leadership is Language, or Turn the Ship Around. That's the other famous book from David. And otherwise, just contact you. I know that you do a lot of work with organizations. I heard very good, very positive feedback on how you help executive teams to change the language and to change the culture, the space in organizations, how they interact. So if anyone has questions, please reach out to David or follow him. You also have, I think, very good, you call them leadership nuggets, right? You have like those
nudges, leadership nudges.
Yeah. So please follow
on YouTube.
On YouTube, yeah. So that's great. Is there like a last thing like you want to give or ask to the product manager? community.
I'm good. Thanks for what you guys do.
Good. So we will forward the YouTube link to our community with the leadership nudges. I think that's okay. Is it good for you?
Yeah.
We'll provide the link. Okay, I think that's it. Anna, do you want to close it?
Yes, I'd like to thank everyone who took the time to be with us today. Thank you again. You will receive the recording and the link to the report and the link to David's leadership nudges. Thank you again. Thank you, David, Adrian. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.